My favorite spot on campus hasn't really changed over the past 50 years, and it would be the top of Donahue Hill, a great place to sit and look out over the campus. Of course, it's changed so much over those 50 years, but even back in 1966, you looked out over just a beautiful piece of God's earth and a great place to go and reflect and relax and see the beauty of the campus.
My favorite spot on campus is probably the Chapel of Mary. That's where I was every single Sunday singing with the chapel choir. And that's actually where my wife and I got married. So it holds a very, very special place in both of our hearts. So I would say that.
Well, I came to Stonehill in 1961, and at that time there were 6 buildings on the campus, 3 on the upper campus and 3 on the lower campus, one of which was a brand new boys' dormitory. So I have a fondness, so to speak, for what we call the big house, because at that time the library was held up at the big house on the main, I guess it's really heating room now, and there were stacks in the basement. Also, the chapel was up there, and I availed myself of Mass whenever I could, if my schedule would allow, so that was a special place. The library was quite comfortable, and I just love that building anyway. It's a beautiful, beautiful building, and I always felt comfortable there. Occasionally we would go to the second, we meaning I, because would go to the second floor, and there were offices up there, as well as the president's office. I'm guessing that's still the case. The office of the president is up there. And believe it or not, in those days, there were obviously fewer students. Most of us were commuters. And there were a lot of wonderful priests and brothers that were part of the faculty. And everybody seemed to know everyone else. You were very comfortable with everyone. And anyway, it was not uncommon for me once in a while and a friend, we would drop in on the president. I mean, it was just to say hi and, how you doing or whatever. And that's how comfortable we felt. I just loved that building. And I loved that place. I love Stonehill, let's face it. There's nothing that I have no negative feelings of Stonehill. Also, I may as well mention that when Ed and I got engaged, we actually got engaged at the chapel at the big house. And we had I can't remember the word. We had our engagement solemnized, and Father Core, who was the president at the time, officiated at it, and it was special for us.
Gosh, this is a hard one. There are so many special spots on campus. I find myself thinking of the Big Hill quite a bit. Rhododendron Drive is such a special spot. I will say overall, coming to Stonehill feels like coming home. I'm very lucky to live near campus and be able to visit campus as a volunteer or just go there with my family. I have really special memories. I sat on a bench with my husband, newly pregnant, thinking of my first child's name at Stonehill. And when my youngest, when my youngest mastered bike riding, we found ourselves at Stonehill for our first family bike ride. It's been the destination for many long runs and marathon training, and such a special place to come home to. I think especially at the start of the pandemic, I enjoyed going there with my children. We took field trips, and I found that it was such a peaceful place for us. For me, so much of my experience at Stonehill was connected to campus ministry and my involvement there and the way that I developed my faith. And so coming to Stonehill is not just about the memories, but also about my faith. And that has been a benefit to that special place. And a place of solace in this crazy, crazy time. So I am so grateful for all that Stonehill has given me and continues to give me. So I don't have one spot in particular. It's an overall just great feeling of coming home.
My favorite location on campus was basically what was known as the gym. It was the now alumni hall, and that was where the freshman varsity basketball teams practiced, scrimmaged, and the intramural games were held, basketball intramural. I think volleyball was held there as well. And I probably spent maybe, I don't know, 75% of my time there. And then the other spot was the library, and not for the obvious reason of going there to study. It's kind of like the old bank robber who was once asked, you know, why do you rob banks? He said, well, that's because that's where the money is. Well, I went to the library because that's where the ladies were. And that's the truth.
If I were to be on campus right now, on a beautiful day like today, I would like to be walking the campus because it's a habit that I formed when the virus hit, and it gave me a place to go where there weren't a lot of people. So I learned a lot about the campus itself by doing that. My indoor answer would be that I would love to be sitting in the stands at the Paula Sullivan Gymnasium watching the women play basketball.
My favorite spot on campus for the first 2 years I was there was the SEM, because I lived there. And it was basically like its own family. We had our weekend breakfasts, which were the best. I still miss them to this day, but wouldn't it be great to have people make breakfast for you anyway on a weekend basis? And the friends that I met there, I'm still friends with to this day. And then for my second 2 years, the favorite spot is right in the quad at the clock, looking up at Donahue Hall, because it's just such a perfect representation of the campus. I mean, I loved the heights where I lived, and I loved everything else, but that spot just summed up Stonehill for me.
Well, we only had 2 locations on campus. One was the big house, I think they called Donahue Hall, and the other was a science building. Everything took place at the big house, down cellar. We had the bookstore, the cafeteria, and meeting places. It was well done. It was just a great, enjoyable location because everybody went there, and everyone was so happy to be together.
So my favorite spot on campus would be the cafeteria. I just loved seeing everyone coming and going, see how everyone's day was during brunch, recap over the weekend. It's just a wonderful spot to come together as a community.
My favorite location is the lounge on the first floor of Donahue Hall. So I believe it's called the Hurley Lounge. It's a spectacular indoor view of the campus as you look outside, and it has a special place for me because when I was a Stonehill student, it's called the Hurley Lounge, I believe now. That was the reading room of the library. The stacks were, believe it or not, in the basement. So it's a great view, and it has some history for me. But in terms of view, actually, I think the best view of campus is the second floor lounge in the Martin Institute, looking towards Donahue Hall. But anyway, that's my favorite location.
Okay, so my favorite spot on campus would have to be Donahue Hill, like right in front of Donahue Hall. For me, that's the premier spot on campus there at Stonehill where you really begin your journey during orientation as you hear the address from the president. And then that is also the sort of the final place in which you walk down the steps for graduation. So I do think that spot in particular, besides the beautiful views, is the premier spot at Stonehill where you begin and end your undergraduate journey there at the Hill. and a very special place for me, and I'm sure a lot of alums out there.
Oh. My favorite place on campus is the chapel, which is really odd because I don't like oval or round churches or setups, but there's just something about the small, intimate space at St. Mary's that really I like. Plus, there's purple chairs, and how many chapels or churches have purple chairs? So that's really one of my favorite places on campus. And even now, when we go back for a special event and we have the opportunity to go to Mass on campus, I still love going back there. So I'd say one of my favorite places on campus is the chapel.
The favorite places on campus, I'm going to pick Holy Cross Center. It's rather unique for me. I was a commuter student, and as a result of that, I didn't have much interaction with students and their behaviors. But I was asked to go there as a number of adults were. And the idea was to build a living learning community. The faculty or the people who lived there included many CSCs, the Holy Cross Fathers, such as Bob Cruz, Willie Raymond, Tom Clark. We had just a wonderful group of people, and certainly led by Bill Braun. He was the architect of this living learning community. And students were able to interact once a week in a T group, and that training group allowed them to see their own inner behavior, and they were challenged as far as who they were, and they reacted in such a way that they built a much stronger community. And he was a master at being able to reach a person and to perhaps change behavior or to encourage that behavior to spread to other folks. And Holy Cross Center really was a special place, and I think an awful lot of students were saved as a result of living there, quite honestly, because they learned about themselves and how to change. One additional spot on campus I'm going to mention that's kind of unique to me as a longtime Dean of Admissions, my office was a special place. And I was reminded of this in talking to Jen Silva when she reminded me of her interview back in the day. And it was a special place because I was at that point in time doing an awful lot of interviews. That was common in those days and not so much anymore. Everything is done en masse. But the opportunity to meet and get an insight to a person and see their future because they were excited about it. They were able to demonstrate things they had already accomplished, but most important, they were excited about doing something at the next level, and that collegiate level provided opportunities to them. And it was a great time in my day is to have those interviews.
I would say when I was at Stonehill, and actually even now, I love the big house, have always loved the big house. I think the presence of the big house and the Ames estate adds that character. When I was a student, I used to go sit on the hill. I used to do my reading for English class. And my new favorite spot, although the big house is always the big house, is the lobby of the Leo Meehan Business School. Being a business major myself, the new business school, if you get a chance to look at it virtually, it's amazing. There's one of those beautiful fireplaces. It's real modern and open looking. But Stonehill having a named business school now is huge.
My favorite or most memorable spot on campus, probably the library. I did a lot of work there, but specifically the third floor computer lab. So I had a friend, my friend Connor McGlade, also in 2011, he cued me into this third floor computer lab our sophomore year. And for the next, until I graduated, that was where I did a lot of work, a lot of papers, a lot of research, and had a beautiful view. You could look out onto the W.B. Mason Stadium and the baseball field. So it was nice seeing the sunsets over that window. So even though it was schoolwork, it was still a nice place to do it.
My favorite spot on campus is in front of Donahue Hall, looking up on it and just looking at its majestic beauty. And the reason for that is twofold. One, because that's where I started and ended my education at Stonehill. Especially memorable is climbing down the stairs towards graduation, but more so goes back to when I was a little kid, and during snowstorms, my parents would take my sister's brother and I to Donahue Hall, and we would slide down that hill on sleds with a bunch of other families. So every time I go back to Stonehill, I make sure to stand right at the bottom on the sidewalk and just look up at it, and just brings back a lot of fabulous memories for me.
Well, a favorite place of mine at Stonehill is actually Alumni Hall. When I was at Stonehill, it wasn't called Alumni Hall. It was just simply the gym. And I played basketball at Stonehill. So each year for 4 years, from the middle of October to the end of February, beginning of March, I spent a lot of time at basketball practice. And that was for 4 years. And it just became, looking back, it was a special place. Not only were you able to do what you loved to do at the time, play basketball, but you were representing Stonehill. It was just competitive basketball, so it was enjoyable. And since I live nearby, one special place is simply the campus at Stonehill. For over the years, whether during the 4 seasons, winter, summer, spring, the fall, we would spend, each week we'd spend hours, walking on campus. We did it, post-graduation, and we still do it today. And we've seen Stonehill grow, so it's, we know the Stonehill that we attended, as I think Bernadette said, there were 6 buildings. They're probably 3 times the number of that now. But it was a continuum, and it was a sort of something special. It was a gift in itself to be able to see Stonehill 60 years ago and what it is now. And for us, it's just a continuum. It's not, this is what it was then, and this is what it is now. It just continued. It was just a nice feeling for different reasons. The first 4 years you were, attending school, classes, and so forth. And now, 60 plus years later, you're just enjoying the serenity that the campus provides. So that's a special reason that makes Stonehill a special place for us.
So my absolute favorite spot on campus is the Chapel of Mary. So I have had the privilege of singing in the chapel for so many different kinds of events, everything from your regular Sunday night mass with all the students. I used to sing with the community on Sunday mornings. I've been a part of the Easter Mass with the community and weddings over the summer with Stonehill alums, and then even with funerals. And those were funerals of alums or even some current students. And from good to bad and from happy to sad, the Chapel of Mary just brings everybody together. And when you leave that building, you feel a sense of peace and just a sense of comfort. And no matter what, and it's not the building that does that, although not many things make me happier than kind of just going into the chapel and getting the chance to just be in there and sing in there. But it's really the people that building brings together, and those traditions and those different events that truly just make it such a special place. And I think that kind of centerfold of campus.
Favorite places on campus, I would probably have to say there were 3. First is obviously Brother Mike's, which is, as we all know, was probably the first run college campus bar on college campus. That's where we all got together, obviously on Friday and Saturday nights, Sundays. And there was a weeknight. I'm trying to remember what it was. Was it a Wednesday? I can't recall. But that's where we all kind of got together, and it was a great place to mingle where you didn't have to go any place out. Second place, obviously I would be the cafeteria. The cafeteria was where we all kind of met. And I think some of us would get there 5 o'clock when open. We probably wouldn't leave till 7 o'clock. We'd stay there 2 hours and catch the people there. So it was like a communal place to kind of meet outside of your townhouse. The last place would probably be the quad. The quad is where we had back in those days, you had intramural soccer, intramural football, softball, and it was just, we got, obviously you had we had mud football in the snow. It just was a great place. We all kind of got together. Everybody kind of knew that.
My favorite spot on campus would be the benches near the water fountain outside of the library, because I love to people watch, and you can see pretty much everywhere on campus and watch everybody walking to classes or playing on the quad. And especially in the summer, I went there a lot and I brought my daughter on campus. So it was fun to watch her just interact with the water and move some of the rocks around campus.
My favorite spot on campus is the upstairs seating area in the Martin Institute. It was such a cozy spot to meet up with classmates and friends before and after class, and the view of Donahue was such a great bonus.
Hi everyone, my name is Micah Christian, class of 2006. And although we're not able to come together as a community, it is still such a blessing to come together virtually to celebrate Stonehill for this Stay at Homecoming event. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share with you all a Queen of the Summit. Queen of the Summit, light and hope surround you. Star on the hillside, our anchor and our stay. Queen of the summit, in labor and in love, watch over us from above. Watch over us in your love. Be well, everyone.
My most memorable professor, I would have to say, was Professor Vaughn. I had him twice in the same semester, and it was absolute torture. I received C's in both of his classes. He really believed in class participation, and not the type of class participation where he called on you and you would answer. You had to be willing to raise your hand and offer your perspective or answer questions without him calling on you. And I wasn't ready for that. When I had him, I think it was sophomore year, and participation was a large percentage of the class grade. I had to take him my last semester, senior year, and I was crazy worried about it. And I just decided that nope, I was going to put my best foot forward. If I didn't understand something, I would sit outside his office and I'd make sure that I understood it. And I really applied myself differently in that semester. And I participated and I made sure I was paying attention. And I figured out that I grew so much from that, taking the experience the first time to the second time. And it was really about me and not about him on why I got the C's that prior semester. So Professor Vaughan would be my most memorable professor.
And I would have to say Herbert Wessling. He was my economics professor, and I had a degree in business administration. So therefore, I had him all 4 years. All my professors were great, frankly. And but I like Herb because he was very compassionate, very interesting, and learned in economics.
My favorite professor was Christian Martin in the French department. He made improving my French a lot of fun, and he made me love both the French language and culture so much that I've spent 2 of the last 4 years living in France. I really couldn't have done it without him.
For my favorite professor, I actually have 2. There was Professor Estrin, Professor Barbara Estrin, who was my mentor at Stonehill in the English department. She taught me a lifelong love of Shakespeare, and I stayed in touch with her for years after college. And she always said she remembered my smile in class and the interest in her classes. And then my second favorite is Wendy Chapman Peake, who I had as a Canterbury Tales professor, and she's the one who taught me how to basically read between the lines of text and continued my lifelong love of reading.
My most notable faculty members are people that I had, in some cases that I didn't have. I'll start with people that I didn't have that I know are memorable through people throughout the ages because of my unique situation of being a member of the administration as well as being a student. And C. James Cleary from the history department was always one mentioned because of his unique ability to be able to go through a class without a note, and that he was a master command of his subject matter, and to always end right at the end of the bell in the right point of which he was interested in pursuing. Also, I picked out 3 people from different disciplines. Chet Ramo from the science department, Fred Petty from liberal arts, and Hossein Kazemi from the business department. Through the years, I've heard people talk about them, and they sort of represent a number of faculty who have the same attributes of being able to reach out to students in such a way that they excited them about the material, they prompted them to do things beyond the classroom, and they worked them very diligently while they were in the classroom. So they were always mentioned as top-notch people. And as I say, they were representative of an awful lot of the faculty. My person I'll pick is John Broderick. He was new to the department in sociology, which was just coming on board at my time. And we certainly learned definitions about different areas, but we also learned about societies and how they came about, how they were managed, how they fell apart perhaps, or how they prospered. And beyond just learning definitions, he made sure that we learned that we had opportunities as students, opportunities to change society, to change culture. And he instilled that upon us, that we weren't just pulling in information, but we were also learning about how to do things and how to make society a better place. So those are my notable type folks.
Professor Albert Cullum. He was beloved by many teachers, the ed majors. At the time that I had him, I would say he was probably in his mid-80s. He brought more energy than any professor I've ever had. It filled the room. I still feel his spirit when I teach. He brought such fun and creativity to all that we did, and just gave us this spark. And I think of him often as I was doing remote teaching and teaching through the pandemic with my second graders. Over the years, I've always used his Aesop Fables, a wonderful book that he put together. Students still love it to this day. But I do think of him a lot during this challenging time for teachers, and I try my best to channel his energy.
In my freshman year, I had C. James Cleary for history. He was an amazing professor. Had a long career at Stonehill, retired as executive vice president, was actually interim president for a while. And I took a course in the Civil War from him as a freshman. And it was really inspirational. To this day, I'm a student of the Civil War. I read everything I can about the Civil War. I watch every Civil War movie, and he really inspired me about that. But after that, I had a young PhD Stonehill graduate named Dr. Richard Finnegan, who came up from Florida State to teach political science. And I think in my 3 years, sophomore, junior, and senior year, I think I probably took 10 courses from Dick Finnegan. He was an amazing, energetic, brilliant guy, and he taught for many, many years at Stonehill. But those 2 guys really impacted me in terms of really lifelong learning and a sense of the importance of history and politics.
So I'm going to go a little bit off script here. I actually have 2 favorite professors. One of them is Professor Deb Salvucci, who helped me immensely get through my accounting and business classes. And then to offset that, I wanted something very different. And so I went the English route. I minored in English, so I have to give it up to Katie Conboy. She really opened my eyes to the joy of something that was completely outside of the realm of the business classes I was taking.
My most memorable professor is Professor Warren Dolan. He and I connected right when I got onto campus, and I took every class that I could of his, and we've stayed connected for all these years, get together from time to time, and he has been a really great mentor for me, and so I'm very grateful for Professor Dolan.
My favorite professors. Actually, as I think about it, I had three. Father David Arthur was my logic professor. I took that course the first semester of my freshman year, and the timing was perfect for me because basically the rigor that he demanded, intellectual rigor that he demanded of the kids in the class, really eliminated a lot of the muddle that I brought between my ears when I first came to Stonehill. But the other two that I remember really well is Basil Fitzgerald, who taught English Lit, and Jim Cleary, who taught history. Because they showed me that if you want students to enjoy your class, to have a positive intellectual experience, to leave the class believing that it was worthwhile, then the professor, for any of that to happen, the professor has to personally bear witness to the value of what they teach. Because if the professor doesn't show enthusiasm for the discipline, you can't expect that your students will. And that's what Mr. Fitzgerald and Mr. Cleary showed me in the way they taught those classes.
So my favorite professor is Dr. Fred Petty. I had him my freshman year, and one memorable moment was taking notes furiously, writing down everything he's saying, and realizing that he had a very heavy Boston accent, and I was translating some of the words wrong as a New Yorker and just leaving off R's just left and right. So Fred Petty, super enthusiastic, smart man, and really had a great introduction for me to Boston.
My favorite professor was Chet Ramo, by far. He was one of my hardest, but I could not wait to get to his class because he loved talking so much about astronomy and geology. You couldn't help but be caught up in it. I remember the night that he came in with the box of Morton salt, and he pushed all the desks to the corner of the room. He probably did this for everybody, but he opened the salt and he made this big swirl. And then he got down on the floor and he caught one piece of salt and he picked it up and he said, "This is the earth." I'll never forget that.
Okay. I remember my freshman year, it was kind of a unique experience because our class, it was the class of 64, was the first class to live on campus. And 40 guys lived at this Pius X Retreat House, as it's called now. At that time, it was just called the residence for the class of 64. There were 40 of us there. And Father Hogan was the prefect and so forth. So it was nice to have Father Hogan. I had him for theology too, and he was quite a significant professor there, you know, having studied in Rome. But I just picture him on Saturday morning with a mop and a bucket of water, cleaning the aisles of the retreat house there, and it was a unique experience. I mean, to say now, you know, most people, if they start college, they stay in a dorm. They'll be in some type of dorm arrangement for 4 years. But this was a unique, a one-time situation, and you really got to know one another. And you didn't like to walk necessarily from the retreat house to the campus, especially in snowstorms. But it was just fun. But you look back on it now and you said, that was a good time. That was nice. You know, it wasn't the luxuries of campus living certainly as you have now. But it was unique in a certain way. And it was part of, my relationship with Stonehill. And on our many walks, we passed that retreat house. And we
served lunch
yeah,
there.
yeah. So, there are a lot of good memories. Stonehill has been very kind to us.
I'm going to say the most memorable professor, not the best, because I have several professors that were equally terrific. Professor Rob Rogers in political science, Professor Rodrigue in the history department. For right now, I'll just speak about Professor McCarran, Professor Ed McCarran in the history department. Memorable because when I first came to Stonehill for my first tour, which would have been November of 2006, I went for a campus tour and I sat in on a class, which was a class taught by Professor McCarran. And it was a terrific class. He was a great professor, really motivated me to come to Stonehill. I then signed up for a few of his classes when I was a student, and he became my advisor. And then he was the last class I had as a senior. So I had my final paper was submitted to Professor McCarran before I closed out as a student at Stonehill. So kind of a nice bookend, start to finish in that sense.
I would definitely say without hesitation, it's Deb Salvucci. She was my academic advisor, and she also helped mentor me through the business program. I had her for both financial and managerial accounting. Not easy classes for me, but she definitely helped steer me in the right direction. Also lined up my senior year internship. And if you're not aware, she is now the academic dean for the business school, the Leo Meehan Business School, which is a great honor for her and also a great honor for Stonehill and us business alums, because she's a fantastic advocate for the school. And I'm very happy that that Stonehill now has two schools. It has the May School for Arts and Sciences, as well as the Leo Meehan School for Business. And that's huge. It's a great honor for Stonehill to have both of those. There's always been a strong business program, and now having Deb Salvucci in the head of that, it makes it even better.
My favorite professor on campus, or the favorite professor I had while at Stonehill, was Professor Brian McKenna in the Healthcare Administration Department. Professor McKenna was always someone that I learned from, not only of the in-class, lectures and the projects and the exams that we had, but also just the real-world application he was able to bring from his experience into the classroom, but also speaking to all of my classmates and myself as equals, and to hear his lectures, whether it was supervision and leadership or healthcare employment law, it was always just fascinating to see how much knowledge he had and was able to bring into the classroom, but also treating all of his students with the utmost respect and courtesy when talking about these issues or these overall large topics. And so I miss him, and I hope him and his family are doing well. Professor McKenna is one of the greatest that Stonehill has had in its history.
Well, I actually had three that I had to think about. There was Professor James Keneally, who was my U.S. history teacher and also a great teacher, just an absolutely great teacher. And as many of you know, had a military career in addition to his teaching career, and he was really, truly an officer and a gentleman. The others were Ron Fraser, who had a great flair. In fact, I think he may have been, was the director at the theater club. And he always reminded me of a 1930s movie star, the way he dressed, the way he conducted himself. And he was my rhetoric professor. Father Augustine Peverata was my Western Civ professor. And Father Peverata gave me a great shot in the arm. I remember seeing him after second, third class, and he said, "Dr. Michael, how are you?" And I thought to myself, he just called me doctor. And for a guy with not a great deal of academic pretension, I thought that was pretty good. However, later on, I found that he addressed everybody by the name doctor, so it kind of put a pin in my balloon at that point. But he was actually a fabulous teacher as well. But I guess if I had to pick among the three, I think that it would be Professor James Keneally. Just because, maybe it was because he gave me an A and the other guys didn't, I don't know. But that's my favorite professor.
My favorite professor is Professor Matina. She always just had an engaging class and always would challenge us with everything. And she was also very human. I know I was in her class one time when I had a death in the family, and she sent me a very personal note afterwards and checking in on me and checking in on me afterwards. And even to this day, just being friends with her on Facebook and seeing what she's doing and showing what's happening on campus, as well as sharing cute things on election day, really helped make the day go a little quicker than it was.
Favorite professors while I was there, I'd probably name three. I was an education major and a minor in psychology. Education, two teachers I liked the best were Al Cullum, who was great. He's the one that kind of instilled in me there's a difference between childish and childlike, as far as quality. So in the classroom, you can exhibit like childlike qualities as opposed to childish. He was also a professor I contacted 2 years after I graduated. I was teaching third grade at the time, and I remember back then he had a play for Scrooge, and he actually sent me the whole thing through the mail. We put on the play in class for the class and also for the parents at night. So he was great. Also, Al Siri was the head of the department at that time, and he was down to earth, helped me get hooked up with a guy for student teaching that we were kind of like on the same wavelength. He was great. And the other one, as far as psychology, was Father Frank Walsh. I actually lived in the Holy Cross Center first 2 years. Father Walsh was there. He was also my encounter group head for those 2 years I was there. I had a couple classes with him, and even one of the ones that we designed ourselves. But he was a great guy. He was very down to earth, soft spoken, good guy.
One professor that is memorable was Cornelius Cleary. I believe that was his first name. He taught history in a very distinctive way. He was, it's hard to explain. His presentation, his diction, everything was very wonderful. And we were all sitting in his class trying to write notes, as fast as he was talking. It was a bit of a challenge. But he was quite a wonderful man. In fact, I believe I know he was appointed a president of the college pro tem. I can't remember who he came between, but I'm sure he did a remarkable job. So he was the one that kind of jumped out at me. I loved all my professors, really. As I said, it was a smaller school, and you got to know everybody. So anyway, that's my little bit about professor.
You know my words.
My favorite Stonehill tradition has to be anything involving dances or the concerts at Spring Weekend in the old sports complex. I have always been saying that I saw They Might Be Giants back at Spring Weekend at Stonehill, and I wasn't 100% sure that was correct, but I looked it up. And yes, my junior year, I did indeed see They Might Be Giants perform at the old sports complex, singing Particle Man and all those other songs that still stick with me to this day.
My favorite Stonehill tradition, I thought a lot about that. It is the Century Club Christmas celebration. And the reason for that is because it's where you basically see everyone, including people that you haven't seen for a while at various occasions. And it's a happy time, it's a celebration. And, you know, there's really no stress. It's just enjoy yourself and it's a good time. And that's my favorite. So that's my favorite Stonehill tradition.
It comes at no surprise that my favorite campus tradition at Stonehill would have to be, of course, Mr. Stonehill. I love the event just because there's so much hype that goes into it. There's also a great time for the community to come together to just share some laughs and some dancing and just a lot of fun where everyone can just celebrate sort of this sort of tradition that happens every fall with 10 or 12 of the goofiest guys on campus. And so I just think it's a really fun event. It's one that's filled with just good times and good cheer just overall good feelings, good vibes. So Mr. Stonehill, definitely my favorite campus tradition overall.
My favorite Stonehill tradition, I really have two. The first is during freshman orientation, we used to have what was called Into the Streets, where the Stonehill freshmen would go into the greater Brockton area and visit a home for at-risk youth, or might be for people who are homeless. And the reason I like that tradition was because besides the impact that it had on the clients at these places, I think it gave Stonehill students an appreciation of how fortunate they are that they're looking at 4 years of college life ahead of them. And I kind of hope that it would also make them maybe appreciate more the opportunities that they have and maybe make more of those opportunities than they would otherwise. But my other tradition that I like is, I think it's 1989, was the first Stonehill Hall of Fame athletic induction dinner. And for the first 17 years, I was the MC of that. And I really enjoyed the experience of recognizing some fantastic Stonehill student athletes and the coaches that guided them through their athletic career at Stonehill. And it was especially important to me because athletics played a major role in my own life.
The memorable campus tradition that I have is when my friends and I would get together to dress up for the Halloween mixers that were held in the gym, or what's now known as the Spoco. It was just so much fun, and every year to see what everybody dressed up as and to try to figure out who your friends were that you didn't know what they were going to dress up as. So that was one of my favorite campus traditions.
One tradition that had begun, I don't know, it's at least 10 years or more, by the Alumni Association. And I'm happy to say I was part of the committee that thought it up, although I'm sure it was not my idea. Anyway, is the children's Christmas concert. My children were grown and, when this took place, but grandchildren were able to enjoy it. It was just a wonderful, it still is ongoing. It has changed a bit, but it's a wonderful gift to the alumni and the children, especially when they had the Stonehill band, orchestra band, I guess it was, with those students. I was so proud of those students. They would show their instruments and invite the children to come up afterwards and take a look at them and enjoy hearing what it sounded like. I just thought it was a wonderful idea. It's continued, so it was a great idea. And again, it's a gift. I'm so proud of the school. It just is giving. So I'm glad for that. Do you have anything?
Well, I would just add, over the years, I've been able to take advantage of the continuing education they have at programs they have at Stonehill, participating in book clubs. And for a couple of years was certainly enjoyable. In fact, we're starting one this coming Wednesday on history, which we're looking forward to. In fact, I think I do more preparation now than I did when I was a student. It's on Stonehill, you know. So going to Stonehill was a reawakening. You know, you're going to Stonehill, you're 17, and you think you got it all down pat. You know, all you got to do is put the ball in the basket. That's fine. That's your goal. That's if you did that, that was good. You know, that's all that it was. But so, but in different phases of, you know, Stonehill has been the platform in which we've benefited tremendously from it. And I'm very thankful for Stonehill for having that available to us. And it's just a nice place to spend time.
Mm-hmm. What I really enjoyed was the Ames Center being a new facility and having the opportunity to run indoors. At that time in my life, I made a habit of sort of running every day, and it provided an opportunity to run indoors and not be out in the cold. And when I also think about Stonehill, I also think about Senior Week. I think that was one of my favorite times, being part of the senior class and being able to go down the Cape and have a lot of fun with my friends, and then also come back onto campus, stay over, and then have graduation the next day. So that really was a great time. And one thing I've always enjoyed, and I still go back as an alum when we're able to, is Mass. So Sunday night Mass at 9 p.m. was also a great time for me on campus. It was a time for me to unwind and sort of get myself focused for the next day.
My favorite campus traditions actually came out of the campus ministry. While I was there, the campus ministry had a really big impact on my experience at Stonehill. And, you know, they had the Into the Streets program. I used to love singing every Sunday with the chapel choir, and the Hope trips were really formative for me. And so I would say that those are probably my favorite campus traditions.
Well, the campus tradition during my time is no longer a tradition, but we had no football team, so the first big athletic event was the first basketball game of the season. And the tradition was that the freshman class would bang a drum for the number of hours of their class. So for our class, 1970, we banged a drum 70 hours consistently before the first basketball game. So it was round the clock, and we were freshmen. And quite frankly, I got to know people doing that because, you know, some of my friends picked crazy hours to go out there and bang the drum. But that was a lot of fun back in those days.
My favorite tradition at Stonehill is actually something that I've had the opportunity to do since I've graduated. And it's the holiday party that we have every year for the Century Club. It's nice to see people from all different classes come to the event. It's nice to see everybody all dressed up in their holiday attire. I like going to Mass before we go to the event, and I like being a place on campus, oddly enough, that didn't exist when I was there. So I'd say my favorite tradition is the annual holiday party that we have in December.
One of the famous traditions where I was there would be called Freshman Pond Night, which occurred one night, normally in April in the spring. And we would obviously kind of raid O'Hara Hall, and we'd haul out the freshmen a couple at a time, and we'd be dunking them in the pond. That was the bridge. It's a much bigger bridge now, but like the bridge, the small bridge between the O'Hara Hall and the academic building.
My favorite tradition at Stonehill would be a tie between homecoming and Midnight Madness. I just love all the excitement that happens, having the whole school together, getting to see different teams and sports come together and cheer each other on as they launch into their season, as well as with homecoming, you know, seeing the alumni come back. And it's fall. It's the best time of year anyways at Stonehill, right?
I was a student who commuted, so that we didn't have many traditions as a commuter. The resident students might have had a few more, but there was one that was enjoyed by all. And in that era of 1960s, the beating of the drum. That seems kind of odd. Well, the beating of the drum meant that the sophomore class would beat a drum for consecutive hours that were linked to the last two digits of the graduation year. So in my case, it might have been 1968. So therefore, 68 hours, that drum had to be hit for that period of time. And it would be day or night, and we would be in the middle of the quadrangle. And you had a large bass drum, and during the night, they had brought in a large barrel where they put wood in and kept the fire going because this was November. And it was tied to the first home basketball game, so that the 68 hours would start, in this case, 2.5 days prior to that game, and end up at the basketball game. Well, also the tradition included the upper class juniors to try to steal the drum, so that they would hide around the campus, whether it be in the cafeteria or in what was then Holy Cross Hall, the classroom building, and would attack to try to get the drum. And because it was for consecutive days and nights, faculty got a little tired of having that drum beat while they were trying to run a class. Students were not being able to sleep because it was at nighttime as well. So I think that sort of ended the tradition after many years, but it was a fun one. It caused no harm, but it did build spirit for that first home basketball game. The other one I'll mention is something that I observed by the Vice President of Student Affairs. And Lou Saltrelli started a midnight breakfast. And this may be something that's mentioned by others as well, but prior to the first exam, they would hold a breakfast starting at midnight for the students to come into the dining hall. And everybody enjoyed a breakfast cooked by faculty and by administrators at that time. And it was a great stress reliever. It allowed the students to have a little fun before that first exam, and also, you know, a little nutrition as well, we hope.
Being an evening division student was certainly an interesting experience because most of the people that I went to school with were working a full-time job and married. Many had families. So going to school was really a difficult thing for most of us to be able to do, but we needed to do that in order to progress in our jobs. One of the things that I was able to participate in as an evening division student was I sat on the academic policy committee one year. The reason for that was that oftentimes the first night of the semester, you'd go and you'd sit and you'd get the syllabus and all that. But there was really no class held. And for us, it was difficult because your final exams then took place 2 to 3 days before Christmas, which was chaotic. So I started a petition to have the syllabus mailed to us so that we could go to the bookstore, buy our books, and the first night of class, we knew what the topic was because it was in the syllabus. And at that point, I was able to get on the academic policy committee. I must have been appointed to that by the evening division office. I don't remember how it came about, but I presented my argument as to why the evening division should do that, and then exams would be 1 week earlier. And my argument apparently worked because they changed it. They changed it so that we got our syllabus before the first night, could pick up our books, and then the first night of class was an actual class, and the exams took place 1 week earlier. What ended up happening after I left was it went back to the old way, because I don't know if the professors didn't like having to do that or how it all worked out. But I was actually very proud of the fact that I was able to convince them to make that change.
I think the favorite tradition that we had was the two clubs, the Veterans Club and the Resident Club that I belonged to. And we would put on different affairs like a wild turkey hunt and many other occasions that we had. But the most important part of it was the camaraderie of all the students. They were just tremendous. And no matter where you went and who you talked to, they were always upbeat. They were always thinking of Stonehill, thinking of their career, and always willing to help you in your studies. And I think that's what really made the difference.
So my favorite Stonehill tradition would be Mr. Stonehill. I was involved with it every year, loved it so much, was able to host my senior year, and it's just a great group of people and a wonderful way to show pride to the school and the senior class and all other classes, and just a great happy time on campus.
May the road rise to meet you. May the wind be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face. May the rain fall softly on your fields. And until we meet again, may you keep safe in the gentle, loving arms of God. For everything there is a season, a time for meeting, a time to say goodbye. In all things, God is near, always guiding your way. May the road rise to meet you. May the winds be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, upon your face. May the rain fall softly on your feet, and until we meet again, may you keep safe in the gentle, loving arms of God.
For everything there is a season, a time for searching, a time for